popular lore stories of Resident Evil, a complete anthology of horror, mystery, and conspiracy. From the origins of evil to the legacy of survival. 1996 to 2025. Introduction. Welcome, traveler, to the dark and twisted corridors of the Resident Evil universe. What you are about to hear is not merely a collection of stories, it is a tapestry woven from 3 decades of horror, tragedy, conspiracy, and survival. Each tale flows into the next, connected by threads of viral infection, corporate greed, and the indomitable human spirit that refuses to surrender even when faced with unspeakable evil. Close your eyes if you wish. Let the words wash over you like a gentle tide, even as they carry you through laboratories of nightmares and cities consumed by the walking dead. These are the stories that millions of players have lived, the lore that has captivated generations, and the mysteries that continue to haunt the shadows of gaming's most beloved horror franchise. The Resident Evil series, known as Biohazard in Japan, has captivated audiences since its debut in 1996. What began as a survival horror game about a team of special operatives trapped in a mansion filled with zombies has evolved into one of gaming's most expansive and intricate mythologies. From the Progenitor virus to the mold, from Raccoon City to a remote European village, the franchise has built a world where corporate greed, scientific hubris, and ancient horrors intertwine. We begin our journey not with the first game, but with the true origin of all the horror to come, a flower that blooms in darkness, a dream of evolution, and 3 men whose ambitions would reshape the world in blood and chaos. Era 1. The Primordial Origins. Ancient Secrets and the Birth of Umbrella, pre-1967, 1978. Story 1. The Stairway to the Sun. Long before the first zombie shambled through the halls of the Spencer Mansion, before Raccoon City became a graveyard of 100,000 souls, there existed a flower. It grew in darkness, deep within the caverns of West Africa, tended by a tribe called the Ndipaya for untold generations. They called it the Stairway to the Sun, Sonnentrep in the German tongue, that would later be used in scientific papers describing its properties. The Ndipaya understood something that modern science would take decades to rediscover. This flower was not merely a plant. Within its petals lived something ancient, something that predated human civilization itself. A virus, perhaps hundreds of millions of years old, had made its home within the Sonnentrep. When consumed, this virus would kill most who ingested it. Their bodies would fail, their organs would liquefy, and death would come swift and terrible. But for the rare few, those whose genetic makeup aligned with some unknowable pattern, the flower granted gifts beyond mortal comprehension. Enhanced strength that could shatter stone. Intellect that could pierce the veil between science and magic. Regenerative abilities that defied death itself. And most precious of all, lifespans that stretched across centuries. The Ndipaya built an entire civilization around this flower, constructing elaborate underground gardens and temples in its honor. They developed rituals to identify those who might survive the transformation, and those who did became their kings, their priests, their living gods. For thousands of years, this secret remained buried in the African earth, known only to the tribe who guarded it. And then, in the age of exploration, a man named Henry Travis wrote of the Ndipaya legends in his Natural History Conspectus. Most scholars dismissed his writings as fantasy, the fevered dreams of a man who had spent too long in foreign lands. The book was forgotten, relegated to dusty shelves in private libraries. But one copy found its way into the hands of a young British aristocrat with dreams of changing the world. His name was Oswell E. Spencer, and he would become the architect of humanity's darkest chapter. And so the seeds of Umbrella were planted in African soil. Story 2. The 3 Founders and the Discovery of Progenitor. Oswell Spencer was not born evil. He was born privileged, wealthy beyond measure, educated in the finest institutions Europe could offer. But somewhere in his youth, a darkness took root in his heart, a conviction that humanity was fundamentally flawed, destined for extinction unless guided by a superior hand. His hand. In the 1950s, while studying to become a physician, Spencer befriended two like-minded individuals who shared his fascination with eugenics and evolution. The first was Edward Ashford, a British nobleman whose family traced their lineage back centuries. The second was James Marcus, a brilliant scientist whose genius was matched only by his ambition. Together, these three men dreamed of creating a new humanity, stronger, smarter, and free from the weaknesses that plagued ordinary men. Spencer shared with them the contents of Travis's book, and in 1966, the three embarked on an expedition to Africa to find the legendary flower. What they discovered exceeded their wildest expectations. Deep within the Ndipaya lands, in an underground garden illuminated by bioluminescent fungi, they found the Sonnentrep, and within it, a virus that Marcus would name the Progenitor. Marcus understood immediately what they had found. This virus was capable of rewriting genetic code, of producing life itself. He theorized that it might even be responsible for the diversity of life on Earth, an ancient catalyst that had shaped evolution since the primordial seas. The implications were staggering. With this virus, they could create anything. Cure any disease. Enhance any human. Achieve immortality. But there was a problem. The mortality rate for progenitor infection was catastrophic. Out of every 100 people exposed to the virus, perhaps one would gain its gifts. The rest would die in agony. If Spencer was to achieve his dream of a superior humanity, they would need to find a way to make the virus survivable, and that would require resources beyond even their considerable wealth. On December 4, 1967, the three founders established Umbrella Pharmaceuticals. On the surface, it would be a legitimate enterprise, developing medicines and consumer products for the masses. But beneath that veneer of corporate respectability, Umbrella would pursue a darker agenda: the development of biological weapons, funded by military contracts, with the ultimate goal of creating Spencer's New World Order. From noble beginnings came the shadow of empire. Story 3. The Tragedy of the Ndipaya. The Ndipaya had guarded the stairway to the sun for millennia, but they were no match for the combined forces of wealth and technology that Umbrella brought to bear. Within months of establishing their presence in Africa, Spencer's operatives began pushing the tribe from their ancestral lands. Those who resisted were dealt with quietly, disappeared in the night, never to be seen again. Where once a proud civilization had flourished, Umbrella built a research facility. They called it the African Laboratory, though those who worked there knew it by a different name, the Garden. Here, samples of Progenitor could be cultivated and shipped to other facilities around the world, feeding the hungry machine of Umbrella's research programs. The last of the Ndipaya were scattered to the winds, their knowledge lost, their legacy erased. Only the flower remained, continuing to bloom in its underground garden, indifferent to the human suffering that would flow from its existence. In years to come, millions would die because three men found a book and followed its secrets into the darkness. But the story of Progenitor's discovery contains one more tragedy, one that would echo through the decades and connect to events that would not unfold for another century. During their expedition, Spencer became separated from his companions in a blizzard while passing through Eastern Europe. Lost and freezing, he stumbled into a cave, and there he encountered a woman who would change everything. Her name was Miranda, and she had made a discovery of her own, a fungal organism she called the mold, which granted her powers similar to those Spencer sought through Progenitor. The two spent time together, sharing knowledge, and Spencer learned of Miranda's obsession with resurrecting her dead daughter through the mold's ability to preserve consciousness. When Spencer returned to his companions, he carried with him samples of the mold and the symbol of Miranda's village, a four-winged figure that would become the logo of Umbrella Corporation. The connection between Spencer and Miranda would remain hidden for decades, but its consequences would eventually consume the world. The past is never truly buried. Story 4: Edward Ashford's Final Breath. Of the three founders, Edward Ashford was perhaps the most idealistic. While Spencer dreamed of power and Marcus of scientific glory, Ashford genuinely believed that Progenitor could be used to cure disease and end human suffering. He threw himself into research with a passion that bordered on obsession, spending long hours in his laboratory at the family estate in England. But in 1968, barely a year after Umbrella's founding, tragedy struck. Edward was found dead in his laboratory, his body showing signs of progenitor infection. The official report stated that he had accidentally exposed himself to the virus during an experiment, a tragic but understandable accident in such dangerous work. Whispers, however, told a different story. Some within Umbrella's inner circle suspected that Spencer had arranged the accident, eliminating a potential rival and gaining complete control over the company's direction. Edward's idealism had become an obstacle to Spencer's true plans, and obstacles had a way of disappearing around the Umbrella founder. Edward's son, Alexander, inherited his father's position within Umbrella but not his genius. Desperate to live up to the Ashford legacy, Alexander would eventually attempt something unthinkable, using his own children as test subjects in experiments that would spawn one of the most dangerous viruses in Umbrella's arsenal. But that story belongs to another era. For now, Edward Ashford's death marked the beginning of Spencer's unchallenged dominion over Umbrella, and with it, the acceleration of research that would eventually birth the tyrant virus. Death comes for founders and empires alike. Story 5: The Arklay Laboratory and the Birth of Evil. In the Arklay Mountains of the American Midwest, far from prying eyes, Spencer commissioned the construction of a mansion that would become legend. On the surface, it appeared to be nothing more than an eccentric aristocrat's retreat, a sprawling Victorian estate filled with puzzles and secret passages, the kind of place that might house Agatha Christie's most devious murders. But beneath the mansion, hidden by layers of rock and secrecy, lay Umbrella's most important research facility, the Arklay Laboratory. Here, scientists worked to unravel the secrets of Progenitor, to find a way to harness its power without the catastrophic mortality rate that made it useless as a weapon or a tool for Spencer's vision. The mansion above served multiple purposes. Its labyrinthine design, with doors that required chess piece keys and paintings that concealed hidden compartments, was meant to confuse any intruders who might stumble upon the facility. The elaborate puzzles that frustrated future survivors were originally security measures, ways of ensuring that only authorized personnel could navigate the building's secrets. Spencer staffed the laboratory with the brightest minds money could buy, but one scientist stood above the rest: James Marcus, the co-founder himself. Marcus had grown increasingly isolated since the company's founding, obsessed with finding a breakthrough that would cement his legacy. He believed the key lay in combining Progenitor with other organisms, creating hybrid strains that might prove more stable. In his private research quarters, Marcus began experimenting with leeches, simple creatures with remarkable regenerative abilities. He theorized that by introducing Progenitor to leech DNA, he might create a new strain of the virus that could grant its gifts without killing the host. Night after night, he worked alone, speaking to his leeches as if they were his children, his only true companions in a world that failed to appreciate his genius. In solitude, madness and brilliance become one. Story 6: James Marcus and the Queen Leech. By 1978, after years of obsessive experimentation, Marcus achieved what he had dreamed of. By combining Progenitor with leech DNA, he created a new virus, one that could reanimate dead tissue, enhance physical capabilities, and spread through bite or fluid contact. He called it the tyrant virus, or T-virus for short, naming it after the Greek word for a ruler with absolute power. The T-virus was everything Umbrella had hoped for and more. Unlike Progenitor, which killed most of its hosts outright, the T-virus could reliably infect and transform living organisms. Granted, the transformation was not what Spencer had originally envisioned. Instead of creating superior humans, the virus created something far more horrifying. Test subjects infected with the T-virus underwent rapid necrosis of higher brain functions. Their bodies remained animated, driven by base instincts, primarily hunger. The resulting creatures shambled rather than walked, their flesh decaying even as they moved, their only purpose the consumption of living flesh. They were, in every sense that mattered, the walking dead. But to Umbrella's military clients, these zombies were merely a side effect of a weapon with far greater potential. The real prize was what the T-virus could create when applied to hosts with superior genetic compatibility, biological weapons of unprecedented power, super soldiers, monsters, tyrants. Marcus's leeches, meanwhile, had undergone their own transformation. The creatures that had been simple parasites evolved into something far more sinister. The largest among them, the Queen Leech, displayed intelligence that should have been impossible for such a creature. It recognized Marcus as its creator, its parent, and the bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. The other researchers grew uncomfortable around Marcus. They whispered that he had gone mad, that he spent more time with his leeches than with human beings. But none dared confront him directly, not when his creation had made Umbrella's military contracts worth billions. The creator loved his creations too well. Story 7. The Assassination of James Marcus. Spencer watched Marcus's growing power with concern that slowly curdled into fear. The T-virus was Marcus's creation, and as long as Marcus lived, he could claim credit for Umbrella's greatest achievement. Worse, Marcus had begun to show signs of independence, questioning Spencer's decisions, hinting that perhaps the company should take a different direction. In 1988, Spencer made his decision. He summoned two of his most trusted operatives, young men who had proven their loyalty and their ruthlessness in equal measure. Their names were Albert Wesker and William Birkin, and they would become legends in the annals of Umbrella's dark history. Wesker was cold, calculating, supremely confident in his own superiority. He wore dark sunglasses even in the laboratory, an affectation that concealed eyes that some said held no warmth whatsoever. Birkin was brilliant but unstable, his genius constantly at war with his paranoia and his ambition. Together, they made a formidable team. The assassination was carried out with clinical efficiency. Wesker and Birkin cornered Marcus in his private laboratory, and without warning, opened fire. The scientist who had created the T-virus fell, riddled with bullets, his life's work scattered around him. His beloved leeches scattered, fleeing into the darkness of the laboratory's drainage systems. But as Marcus lay dying, his blood pooling on the floor, something extraordinary occurred. The Queen Leech, that impossible creature born of his experiments, emerged from hiding. It approached its creator's body and began to consume him, absorbing his flesh, his blood, and, impossibly, his consciousness. Over the following decade, hidden in the bowels of the Arklay complex, the Queen Leech would grow. It would develop, and it would remember. The creature that had once been simple vermin now carried within it the memories and hatred of James Marcus, waiting for the moment when it could exact its revenge on those who had betrayed him. Even death could not silence the father of the T-virus. Story 8. Project Wesker, The Children of Spencer's Dream. While the T-virus was being developed, Spencer pursued another path toward his vision of a new humanity. In the 1960s, he initiated what would become known as Project W, a eugenics program that would make the Nazis' experiments seem amateurish by comparison. The project was named after its first director, a doctor whose given name has been lost to history. Under his guidance, hundreds of children were identified and acquired from around the world, some adopted through legitimate channels, others taken by force or deception. Each child was selected based on specific genetic markers that suggested potential compatibility with the progenitor virus. All the children were given the surname Wesker, a mark of their belonging to the project. They were raised to share Spencer's values, educated in the finest schools, and monitored constantly for signs of exceptional ability. Spencer believed that one day, these children would be infected with a perfected strain of progenitor, transforming them into the first generation of his new master race. Among the Wesker children, 2 showed exceptional promise. The first was a boy who would come to be known as Albert Wesker, the same cold-eyed operative who would later assassinate James Marcus. He had been a subject of Project W since infancy, raised to believe in Spencer's vision of humanity's evolution. His brilliance and ruthlessness made him the project's greatest success. The second was a girl named Alex Wesker, who developed a close relationship with Spencer himself. Unlike Albert, Alex was made aware of Project W's true nature, and she embraced it fully. She would eventually become the project's head researcher, tasked with finding a way to grant Spencer the immortality he so desperately craved. The other Wesker children scattered across the globe, taking up various professions while remaining under surveillance. Many were drawn to Umbrella's employ, never knowing that they were pawns in a game that had begun before their birth. Of the hundreds who participated in Project W, only 13 were eventually selected for the final phase, and of those 13, only Albert and Alex would survive what came next. Children of ambition, heirs to nightmare. Story 9. The construction of Nest. After Marcus's death, William Birkin assumed leadership of Umbrella's primary research programs. But Birkin was not content to merely continue his predecessor's work. He dreamed of surpassing it entirely. While perfecting the T-virus for military applications, he pursued a secret project of his own, one that would require a new facility hidden even from most of Umbrella's leadership. In 1991, construction began on the networked and specialized technology facility, known simply as Nest. Built deep beneath Raccoon City, connected to the surface by a series of elevators and rail systems, Nest represented the cutting edge of biological research. Its laboratories could contain the most dangerous pathogens known to science, its computer systems could model viral evolution in real time, and its security systems could neutralize any breach. Raccoon City itself was a company town in all but name. Umbrella was its largest employer, its biggest taxpayer, and its most influential voice in local politics. The company had built hospitals, schools, and community centers. It sponsored Little League teams and charity events. To the 100,000 residents who called Raccoon City home, Umbrella was a benevolent corporate neighbor, a source of good jobs and community pride. None of them knew that beneath their feet, scientists were engineering the instruments of their destruction. None of them suspected that the smiling executives who cut ribbons at community events spent their nights creating monsters. And none of them could have imagined that within 7 years, their city would be erased from the map, its population reduced to shambling corpses wandering through streets of ash and memory. Paradise was built on hellfire. Story 10. Lisa Trevor, the Eternal Prisoner. No story of the Arklay era is complete without speaking of Lisa Trevor, perhaps the most tragic figure in Umbrella's catalogue of victims. Her suffering spanned decades, and her twisted existence would ultimately provide the key to Umbrella's most dangerous creation. In the 1960s, George Trevor was one of America's most celebrated architects. Spencer commissioned him to design the Arklay mansion, and Trevor poured his genius into every aspect of the building: the hidden passages, the elaborate puzzles, the secret rooms that concealed the laboratory below. When the mansion was complete, Trevor knew too much to be allowed to leave. Spencer had Trevor's wife, Jessica, and his daughter, Lisa, brought to the mansion under the pretense of celebration. Instead, mother and daughter were imprisoned and subjected to experimental infection with the progenitor virus. Jessica died quickly, her body unable to withstand the virus's assault. But Lisa survived. She should not have survived. The mortality rate for progenitor infection approached 100%, yet somehow, Lisa's body adapted to the virus rather than succumbing to it. She developed incredible physical abilities, strength enough to tear through steel doors, resilience that allowed her to survive wounds that would kill any normal human. But her mind shattered under the strain. Over the following decades, Lisa became the ultimate test subject. Researchers infected her with strain after strain, compound after compound, watching as her body mutated and evolved. She grew larger, more powerful, and more monstrous. Her face became a mass of scar tissue, and she developed a disturbing habit of wearing the faces of her victims, first her mother's, then others, stitched grotesquely to her own skull. Through it all, some fragment of Lisa's original personality remained. She would sometimes be found cradling her mother's skull, weeping tears from eyes that could barely see. She scratched messages into the walls of her prison, pleas for help, expressions of fear, and one phrase repeated over and over: "Where is my mother?" In the late 1980s, Lisa was injected with the Nemesis alpha parasite as part of an experiment to create controllable super soldiers. Her body rejected the parasite entirely, and in doing so, revealed something that changed everything. Within her mutated cells, William Birkin discovered a new virus, born from decades of experimental infection and Lisa's unique immune response. He called it the G-virus. Even monsters can dream of mothers. Follow on to Part 2 of Resident Evil lore to hear about Era 2, the Raccoon City Nightmare.